Okay, so firstly, thanks everyone for joining our webinar, and welcome to our audience. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a little bit. Maybe for those that are watching, just a little bit of admin at the start. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat options. We'll see that as they come through, and I'll try and bring those into relevant points in the discussion. And we also have the wonderful day prodding page in case there's any that I miss as well. So please do feel free to interact via the chat option. There's also a QR code you should see top left. Please do click on that. I think I mentioned on the last webinar, I feel like QVC, like teleshopping, pushing people to a QR code, but please do scan the QR code. It's a contact form to share your details with us for some more information. But firstly, just a little intro to the session, RCS under the microscope. So what we want to do is kind of explore RCS. We're very conscious that it's taken up a significant amount of airspace within the ecosystem, and there's a lot of information, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of hyperbole and a lot of rhetoric. So what we want to do is bring together some of the really kind of key experts in the field to help answer some of the questions, to talk about the channel, explain how it can be used, explain some of its benefits, but also importantly from both Claudine and Catherine, coming from a carrier perspective, really talking about why the channel, why there are some of the requirements around onboarding, verification, etc., and what benefits that brings to brands and consumers and the ecosystem in general. So we're really going to try and dig into and I say scratch beneath the surface there. But again, any questions that crop up as part of the discussion, please do drop them into chat. Just before we do go into kind of the introductions as well, I just want to give everyone a very quick introduction, because one of the key things that I think has been an open question or has been a subject of discussion is around Apple. That's been the massive catalyst for interest in the channel for sure, and it continues to be now, and it continues to be a subject of discussion across the market. So what I want to make sure is make perfectly clear to everyone is Claudine and Catherine aren't in a position to be able to talk about anything specific around Apple and enablement on the carriers. So I will try to field any questions that come in, but apologies in advance if there's something that we can't address. What I can say, effectively, is in the public domain, right? RCS, peer-to-peer messaging using the RCS channel from a user to user was live on iOS 18 at the start of September. So that's available right now, and that's available globally. In subsequent releases of iOS 18, carriers will come on board and so be enabled to support RCS business messaging, so application to person messaging. So brands will have the opportunity to reach not just Android users, but iOS users also. That rollout will vary by market and by carrier. So there are certain carriers that are live already. Other carriers will come on board over the course of the coming weeks and months. So watch this space. I think what I like to do when I talk about this is not think about actually the next week or the next month, but think about 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, because realistically we know that's when we will have Apple on board across RBM enabled markets, and really we're going to get the coverage that brings. So hopefully that's clear. That's okay. So enough of me. I've got a sore throat, so I'm going to be supping a warm drink. But on the plus side, we've got 3 people who love talking about RCS. So I will ask them to introduce themselves in turn, if that's okay. Maybe if you can share a little bit, explain yourself, your role, and maybe your background and experience in mobile messaging and RCS more specifically as well. So Claudine, maybe if I can come to you first.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Claudine Bell. I work for Virgin Media O2. I've worked here for 5 years, but I've been in the mobile messaging space for a tad over 2 decades, which I don't really like to mention because it definitely gives my age away. My role here is in messaging and payments, and I have a focus on RCS for business messaging, as well as bulk SMS, MMS, and payments. Yeah, so that's me. I work very closely with our product team here, and I spend a lot of time working with partners like Infobip, understanding the ecosystem, the brand's needs, and how we can all work together to make it a success and a very slick process.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claudine. And Catherine, maybe if you'd be able to as well, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Catherine McGuire and I'm the RCS product manager at BT. So my role, I've been working in the mobile messaging space. I've actually did it in my head there for about 10 years now. So starting off at GSMA, and I'll talk through some of the stuff that we achieved there as we go through the webinar. And I've been at BT for the last 3 years rolling out RCS both internally with our clients and working with people like Claudine and the other carriers in the UK and making RCS and RBM as seamless as possible proposition for brands to onboard. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And even finally to you, if you'd be able to introduce yourself, please.
Hey, hi, everyone. Great to be here with you and share some experiences. I'm Ivan, Chief Business Officer of Infobip. I lead our strategy globally, go-to-market, and then sales, partnerships, marketing, and developer experience. And I've been now on forefront of trying to commercially scale RCS as well as digital transformation through RCS, in particular in the markets that were not so exposed to other forms of OTT messaging like WhatsApp. So namely the United States, we're literally at forefront of launching RCS in large brands there. And we're working in first larger conversational deployments in RCS, measuring results and so forth. So I will be very happy to share some of these experiences and discussions we have with clients.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ivan. So into the meat of the discussion then. Maybe, Catherine, I'll come to you first. You touched on you previously worked at the GSMA, and of course, the GSMA, for those that maybe aren't so familiar, define the RCS specification, and that's going to become increasingly important with Apple on board because of the need for a clear standards that the channel follows. So maybe you can give us a quick kind of potted history of RCS and why you think it's such an important channel and will be as we move forwards.
Yeah, sure. So RCS predates me in the mobile messaging industry. So I think it was first conceived in 2007 by a group of operators that looked at what was happening in the rise of OTT players. So they wanted something that was more sophisticated than SMS, which this Christmas will be 32 years old and has better features and something that they could use to keep customers in that messaging channel for person-to-person communications. And then I sort of became involved around 2016, and that was when Google became involved as well. And this is when it started to become a more interesting proposition in terms of business messaging. So operators work together globally, and I had the privilege of working quite closely on the Universal Profile, which was published in 2017. Yeah. So it was the first universal standard across global operators to include business messaging within it as well. So since then, it's kind of gone from strength to strength. And I think in 2020, Google said they've got 1 billion users on P2P communications. And we know that the big thing in the last couple of years has been Apple announcing adoption of RCS and potentially RBM. So it's been a long journey for it. And there's been bumps in the road, I think, as everyone knows. But I think it's that position now where it's really ready to grow and scale and going to make customer communications much more exciting for both customers and brands, and going to be a real revenue driver for the messaging ecosystem.
Absolutely. So and maybe it'd be really interesting to kind of understand a little bit more. Just I touched on around the GSMA specification and the role that's going to play. Looking further ahead, we know brands and there's a number of verticals where RCS is already very popular and that will only grow. But are there specific kind of features that you think will become even more relevant for brands moving forward, even if there's maybe some that don't exist currently?
Sure. Is that a question for
yourself or anyone else, please? Yeah.
Well, I think, to be honest, as we see brands moving towards RCS, they're most attracted at the minute, I think, by quite some of the more basic features, such as the blue tick. That has been a real driver for us in terms of the move to branded message or basic message. They want to be able to show their logo within messaging inbox to differentiate from other industries. So a lot of financial services, for example, want to be able to show that blue tick. I think one of the things that when we actually start to look at this as a business messaging proposition back in about 9-10 years ago is the potential to move away from app spend and move that into the best messaging inbox. And I think that's really starting to take effect now. The features of read receipts and messages, things as simple as that we don't get on SMS, are really the things that seem to be, for me, when I talk to brands in the ecosystem, rather than the sort of all singing, all dancing RCS two-way conversation, they're the things that make customers or brands want to definitely get on board, because it's a simple way to increase their analytics on messages and also just make their experience much more delightful for customers in terms of having that logo, blue tick, making the message look much more official. There's so much concern from a lot of customers about spam and fraudulent messages, and RCS can mitigate that concern quite substantially with just the use of a tick and the brand validation process that those messages are guaranteed to go through, rather than just an SMS, which is a bit more of is a bit more susceptible to spam and fraud. So there's sort of as a snapshot of the features, of which there's many. Those are the ones that probably stand out in my mind.
Absolutely. Even coming to you now, Catherine's obviously touched on a number of the features of the channel. You travel an awful lot. You speak to a lot of businesses and a lot of markets and a lot of verticals. So I'd be really interested to hear what you're hearing. What are brands, businesses asking you about the channel, and how are you positioning the channel for them, and talking to them about how they can benefit from using RCS?
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting. I would say I will mention three things, but there are actually two archetypes of clients. So there is one which is really kind of thinking of this as just an upgrade of SMS or MMS. It's a messaging channel, has this features that don't make you suspicious when you receive a message, meaning you have a verified sender, you have a brand, you have a color. It's nicer in message experience, doesn't look just like a text and a link, but you could have an image and stuff. But essentially they just see this as a replacement for SMS. And there, if you kind of go and pitch the whole vision, you lose people there at the beginning. So you need to go slow, and you need to kind of come in and say, hey, this is just, you can think this as a branded SMS, you will have better engagement, we can show you the numbers, whatever communication you do now, it'll just be upgraded. However, there are other clients which are much more advanced when they see the channel and they start connecting the dots and saying, well, I can expose Gen AI into this channel, or I can expose different APIs, and I can really build conversational experiences. Yesterday, I was on a call with a very advanced US client. They have a analytics team, another team. And as we were going through the channel, it just clicked in their head and they said, well, we have all these customer journeys that are in the app or on the website, but actually I can think of this as something that can help me kind of redefine many of the journeys and really, make them quicker, simplify them, make them conversational, capture first party data and so forth. Those people are like much more advanced, and some of these are starting to ask us, can we have 2-year roadmap, what use cases we should roll out, how can we go sort of crawl, walk, run through this and things like that. And there we are having much more in-depth discussion, not procurement type about messaging, but really kind of more, what's your business KPI, how do you want to drive it, and how do we then form the transformation around that. And then I will just conclude with the third thing that I'm sort of hearing on the more advanced, and I'm here at the Gartner conference, and today they also spoke about super apps. And if you start thinking of RCS in a future over, let's say, next year or two, it is actually opportunity for carriers, us and Google, to turn this into really kind of super app that comes natively with your phone that you don't need to install. Because many of the entry point ecosystem, like click to chat from TikTok, is going to be launched very soon in LATAM. Other entry points, maps, etc., and then deep integration into mobile ecosystem of your phone with the calendar, with the maps, with the payments, with the wallet, with etc. So then you're really getting super powerful super app. And to Katerina's point, like, it's not just reducing the app spend, but you don't have maintenance, you don't have versioning issues, and the agility will be dramatically increased because you can just use these building blocks to quickly assemble journeys, because this is one-on-one channel. You can try it in a smaller populations, test, optimize, and then scale, or if it doesn't work, stop that use case. And that's the real kind of game if we think a couple of years forward. But going back, because you asked me what I'm hearing, I would say 70-80% of clients, especially if you think about North America, because this is sort of pivotal moment that market was never on rich messaging in a significant way. They're still thinking of this as a kind of replacement for SMS or MMS, but slowly as you go into conversation, they realize what you can do. The mindset is shifting and they're understanding this is another asset in my digital ecosystem that I will actually have to do much more serious work to think of customer journey, conversational experience, and so forth.
Yeah, and that's really interesting how yourself and Catherine both talked about RCS as being a replacement for many of the use cases that brands are currently using app for. Just one quick kind of maybe follow up on that point, Ivan. You talked about the two different archetypes and how, as you touched on in North America, maybe 70% starting with archetype 1. How do you see that changing over time? Yeah, and I'm presuming you do, because what was interesting about the second archetype, they're looking at 2, 3, 4 ahead. So they're looking at, as you said, a roadmap. So how do you see that kind of balance shifting?
Yeah, so like if we talk about B2B2C platforms, let's say MarTech platforms, they will quickly integrate that channel and spread it in a certain way. But if we're talking about enterprises that want to use this as an additional asset in their digital transformation, I think actually they're usually very cautious and careful. So they will want to see an ROI, try, and things like that. The reason why we have this discussion with some clients, we launched a couple of big brands on the major carriers. I'm not talking about Google Guest Cloud. I'm talking about mainstream launch. And when they saw that the conversion rates are like between 4 and 10-fold versus SMS, then they were like, oh, this is something like special. And then those discussions started. So I think we will sooner rather than later see maybe, usually it's kind of, even on Gen AI, if you look at the advanced people, mid people, or we did study on omnichannel in Europe, usually some equilibrium is like there is 30% of like very advanced, and then around 50% which are kind of in the middle somewhere, and 10% that just don't use the channel or are like very late followers. I think we'll get to that equilibrium. So there'll be people who will want to move a lot of journeys into this channel because they will see a value, whether automating support or elevating their marketing engagement. There'll be some people in the middle that will try to balance, so they might have few advanced cases and then use it as communication plug. And then there'll be laggards, 10 to 20% that will just like think of this with as a late follower. But all I want to say, and to conclude with this, to leave space for others, I mean, if you think of conversational technologies like Gen AI, other things, for all of that to get into hands of the consumer, you need a medium for adoption. And if you think about it, this is a perfect medium for adoption. It's a telco grade, it's secure, and it's getting more secure. And the biggest thing is, like, once you have consent to communicate with people, you can also do outbound with these journeys where they get surprised. Oh, wow, this looks nice, and I can do, more useful things than just click on a link. And I think this will kind of, when these two things meet together with the demand that's coming from younger generation that wants to chat with the business, I think that'll be kind of explosive combo that will drive adoption of this going forward.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Thanks for that, Ivan. A couple of questions have come in, which I'll take the chance to kind of address in a minute, because I do want to make sure Claudine has a chance, because we haven't heard yet from Claudine. But also, and just before that, a really good point, or just kind of maybe confirmation. This is what my customers want to hear on conversion rate. So I think that's a really kind of worth underscoring in terms of the improved performance the channel gives, and how we as an ecosystem can make sure we're kind of mirroring and kind of repeating those benefits back out to the ecosystem and back out to brands that are aware of that. So yes, Claudine, apologies for coming to you so tardy. So you work for O2 Telefonica, or Virgin Media O2, part of the Telefonica group. So you also communicate an awful lot with your peers across Telefonica group, across other markets. So what are some of the best practices, some of the experiences or learning that you hear from other markets, actually, whether that be those that are already kind of mature in the RCS ecosystem, or maybe those that aren't? So what are those kind of nuggets of information that you're sharing across into your peers in other markets as well?
Yeah, I do. I'm fortunate. We do chat a lot, particularly to O2 Germany and to Movistar Telefónica in Spain, and to the Liberty Global networks as well, just because we're obviously a 50-50 joint venture. I think one of the key things for me is everybody's got the same understanding and desire to push the verification piece and that trust in the channel. That's a clear message, whether you're talking to Brazil, to Spain, to Germany, to the Netherlands, whichever network you're talking to, that very much underpins the whole thing. And I think we sometimes learn, we learn by example, right? As human beings, we learn from examples as well. I think Germany, the carriers in Germany are doing an excellent job of working together. We're very fortunate in the UK. Catherine and I, along with our counterparts in the other networks, also get to work very closely. I think Germany are doing a great job of really promoting it and working very well together. Spain do things slightly differently. Spain have a slightly different model for how they work as operators, where in the UK we're very, very much on net. So going back to sort of the Telefonica group piece, yes, we chat, we share findings, we share understandings, we will feed back on what works for us, what little tweaks in the processes that we have to make, whether that's with the brand verification onboarding form or sort of the feedback that we're giving to our partners such as yourselves, and also the feedback that we're taking from partners like yourselves as well.
No, you touched on a good point, and I certainly, when I kind of speak to other carriers as well as brands and platform partners across markets, I do hold up UK and Germany, particularly in terms of European kind of markets, where I refer to them as mature, but not necessarily because of even if it is the volume of the traffic or the brands are on board, but really just because of the approach of the carriers, that collaborative approach, that kind of unified approach between the carriers, and helps an awful lot to grow the ecosystem. A consistent voice, a consistent positioning, and we are starting to also see that in other markets as well. So I think it's worth a kind of a thumbs up to the likes of yourselves, Claudine and Catherine, for supporting that and being such strong advocates for the channel. With 3 questions in, so I'll take a chance to kind of step back to a couple of the questions that have come in. So first one was, how can Infobip or others help influence carriers to accelerate RCS availability in regions where carriers are perhaps not so innovative? The reality is, Infobip, we have 800 plus direct carrier relationships and direct carrier connections across the globe. So we are in constant contact with carriers everywhere. But what's important to note that ultimately the enablement of a carrier into the RBM ecosystem requires themselves and Google to reach agreement and to enable that in their channel. Right now, certainly for the second half of this year and probably into the first half of next year, the ecosystem is very focused on growing traffic in existing markets. So those European markets such as UK, Germany, France, Spain, Belgium, as well as North America and LATAM, Brazil and Mexico and India. So a lot of the focus from ourselves as well as the carriers in those markets and Google is really on driving traffic in those markets. I think we will see an increase, an uptake in carriers moving into the ecosystem through second half of next year, but I think with that will probably be relatively limited until then.
Dave, can I just jump in on that?
Please.
As well, very quickly? Please. So there are 3 essential elements that you need to activate carrier. So number 1 is they need to be convinced around the business case, that won't cannibalize SMS, that it's adding value and things like that. Number 2 is that they have a proper protocols for registration, for handling billing, for assigning numbers, essentially a platform. And number 3, they need to have contract with Google and Apple. So on number 1 and number 2, we can help. Number 1, we actually have carriers that we partnered together to bring RCS. So we exactly know, the dynamics of SMS, how much it retained, why RCS is not a threat, but a build. We are building business cases so we can provide business logic and help build that model. Number 2, we built like a map platform, so messaging platform for carriers to enable them to have their own workflows and so forth, billing, etc., various things. I'm not going to go into details. So that's on us. However, we are all dependent on number 3, and contracting seems to be slow. But we are eager. We see more and more carriers eager to bring it live. So I think there are some things that are out of control of Catherine, Claudine, and ourselves in a way, because that negotiations are happening at some other level. So I think that's the only thing. So to Dave's point, because of that, at the moment, focus is growing traffic in the existing markets, and they're big enough. But I think soon enough, we see some signs of opening of others and bringing them faster in other countries.
Absolutely. And just a second question, how can Infobip or others help work with platform providers, ISVs, such as Salesforce, Microsoft, HubSpot, to ensure RCS is part of their roadmap? Firstly, we absolutely do. So dare I say, if you're in that position, scan the QR code top left and get in touch. But absolutely we do. We work with a number of platform providers, and we are right now, and a number of them are already bringing RCS into their product and channel offering for sure. So I think our partner ecosystem is hugely important to Infobip. Ultimately, that was what, and it will be hugely important to the RCS ecosystem, because that is ultimately what will bring scale. And touching on Ivan's point previously, in terms of the couple of archetypes, there is the traffic that can be moved from or upgraded from SMS, MMS, the traffic, the ability of those platforms to support richer use cases and richer, more conversational experiences. That is hugely important, again, for growing the ecosystem at scale. Ivan, I sense you want to jump in.
Dave, I mean, just to explain to people, I mean, there is a way how we can do that. Let's say just by simply upgrading SMS to RCS on our side on the back end. Then there is a second way, which is more like we put RCS on the marketplace, like Microsoft Dynamics and things like that. And we are working on both. That's really just agreeing with them on our side. And then the third is deep integration. And I can tell you that many of the names you mentioned here, or not mentioned, but similar companies have it in their roadmaps, and they're building teams around it. So exciting things are on horizon.
Absolutely. Now, what I wanted to do is kind of look at one particular aspect of the RBM kind of ecosystem. Claudine, Catherine, you both touched on this actually in terms of some of your previous comments, but maybe Catherine, coming to you kind of first, looking at one of the challenges the ecosystem has, and one of the challenges that we as tier one aggregators have, is how we can onboard brands into the channel. And there at the moment there are different markets have different requirements. Google has certain requirements, different carriers have different requirements, and that can be a source of criticism, particularly in certain markets where maybe SMS onboarding is relatively straightforward and relatively validation free, shall we say. But it is held up, that verification is held up as a really important part of the channel. So maybe you can kind of expand a little bit more on why that's the case. Why is brand verification, sender agent verification such an important feature of RBM?
Yeah, of course, Dave. So maybe touching on what we've done in the UK. So in the UK, I can speak. I do have some knowledge of how other markets do this, and I think the UK is one of the more mature ones.
For sure.
Essentially, what we've done is work together. So the 4 main MNOs in country, and we've got just a universal form that brands will need to fill out via Infobip to launch an RCS campaign, and we've tried to simplify it down as much as possible. But we're also very aware that the rate of RCS agents has grown exponentially in the last even 4 months. We're seeing, we're seeing, I think I looked into some stats on this, and it was like up 300% or so since it would have been the year before. So obviously it's definitely at front of mind for the carriers in the UK to look at something that is maybe more streamlined than that even, or potentially outsourced, because we want to make sure that the channel remains as clean as possible. And that's kind of the reason for this. If we do that, if we give that verified tick, if a brand hovers, if a customer hovers over that on their device, they will see verified by BT, for example. And that's so important for us as a carrier to ensure that we keep that as safe as possible. Customers also react really well to that, especially when they're getting comms that they want to be sure are definitely from the brands that they expect them to be from. So I think there was research done by Twitter, or X as it's known now, that said that 78% of customers would trust a message more if it had that blue tick than if it was just your standard SMS, which is just that and maybe short code with grey text and a link. So that is kind of the reason that we're taking this verification piece really seriously, and we check both the information that comes through from a brand via Infobip. We get the brand to verify the campaign personally, and do quite a lot of checks on those messages to ensure that we can provide that stamp of approval for them. And I think that's something that's going to become more and more important. And for brands coming into the ecosystem, it also makes them stand out from their competitors, which is a really important piece for them. And we've seen interest in this really, really spike. When we talk to brands about, especially I do this both directly to brands and events like this, it really seems to pique the interest of the ecosystem, because everyone is concerned about fraud and security and keeping these channels really, really clean. And I think that's probably the main reason that we have for investing in this verification piece and continuing to do so. I think when I first joined BT 3 years ago, there was like 4 forums across 4 MNOs, lots and lots of admin. It was it was probably drove the likes of you and Infobip mad, having to fill out all those forms. And it's good to see that the UK has streamlined that down and continues to look at ways to further streamline it, which will probably be something we can report on in 2025 as well.
No, that's brilliant. And I often use the example of a user, you're receiving a verified branded message, maybe from a delivery company, and that they might not register it, but maybe they're probably likely to, and then maybe there'll be just a kind of that passing reference to it. But you could probably guarantee that the next time they receive an SMS message from a different delivery company, they will actually trust that little bit less, because they've already received one over a branded verified channel. So actually, the kind of the concerns that are outside in the general public around SMS and the risks that are associated, where they particularly around certain use cases, certain verticals, RCS will really help to drive to solve that. And so kind of extending that point then, kind of Catherine, particularly around brand onboarding and the information, the steps that are required to make sure that who is the brand that's sending that message, you as a carrier, not you personally, maybe. So one of the areas of the ecosystem is, and it was touched on earlier in terms of platforms, ISVs and the like, is how the channel can extend the ecosystem and the value chain back through platform partners and the like, to support reseller, wholesale, ISV traffic, but in a way that does maintain the integrity, to make sure you, as touched on, you do know who is sending that traffic, and you can have confidence in the tick and the message, the verified by carrier message that appears there. So carriers, what kind of discussions that you can share are you having around how to address that problem? Sorry, Catherine, that was to Claudine. Apologies.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, I was sorry. I thought you said Catherine. Sorry.
Apologies, I probably did.
No, that's fine. I talk a lot about the friction of it. People will come to us and say, well, can you make it a little bit easier? Can you trim the form down? The reality is, when you're saying this message and this brand has been verified by O2 UK or, whichever the network is, it's really important that we've got friction, but that we've got it in the right place.
Yeah.
And so I do tend to bang on about that a fair bit.
I like that phrase. I
need it in the right place. Yeah. It's not the first time you've heard me say that, Dave, right? You know that. And again, we are learning. So it's easier to verify a big organization than it is a smaller one, an SMB, sort of a tier 2. So we at Cross Carrier, and without saying too much, we are actually spending this probably, I would say it's fair to say, it accounts for a significant amount of the time. We meet every month, and we are looking at how we can create the friction in the right place, but for the flow down. Is it a question is if you've got an individual, an individual organization with a single SMB, smaller than an SMB, but a single director, would that person be happy to share their identification documents with us? Very possibly. Would I, as somebody who works for a massive company? Probably not. So it may be that we introduce a slightly different verification there to check, to do all the checks and balances. I personally feel that this is something that will become more iterative. I don't think we have all the answers right now. I wish we did, but I think, as Catherine said, it was 4 separate forms. Every form was slightly different. I mean, right at the beginning of RCS business messaging, I think we even had separate durations for conversations.
Yes.
It's about the 3 separate messages. We've got branded message, we've got single message, and we've got conversation. I think each network had a slightly different timeline and when it started and how it started. Obviously, there's been a lot of work done, not just in the UK, but globally, to bring that, to align that. So that simplified it as well. And this is what we are doing as part of the verification. But my view is we don't want to make it too easy right now.
Yeah.
Or indeed ever. We've got to do this, and we've got to get this right, because this is our opportunity as carriers, as an ecosystem, to reignite trust in our channels. We have the benefit of verifying the brands. We, as operators, we have a suite of products to, KYC products as well. So you can check that your consumer at the end of this conversation is who they say they are as well. So, there is a lot of work still to be done, but it's kind of an exciting opportunity as well. It's not always easy, but, it's an opportunity.
Yeah, no,
absolutely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to build on that, Catherine?
No, I think I was just going to say that I totally agree. And for me, I think it mirrors exactly what Claudine says, that we don't have all the answers at present. It's being brainstormed out, as the channel grows and grows, and that's brilliant for us. But the main thing is keeping the channel as clean as possible and ensuring that brands trust it to deliver their messages in a fashion to customers that is secure and as spam free as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Claudine, you touched on conversational pricing, which actually perfect segue into my next question I wanted to throw at Ivan, around particularly around that. And he touched on previously around that second archetype, those businesses that are looking at more kind of richer experiences. And pricing isn't pricing around conversation experiences is an area I often have to feel kind of questions on from brands, and particularly how that's going to be charged in comparison to maybe kind of pricing per message, for example. But RCS is positioned, and there's a question around it that's come in terms of where WhatsApp and other OTT players are active in a market, and the benefits that RCS brings in to be able to provide, as Eva mentioned earlier, a telco-based channel to compete against and to provide those same kind of experiences. So kind of it'd be really good, Ivan, if you'd be able to kind of expand on that a little bit and kind of maybe touch on those verticals where you see, those kind of conversational use cases, the benefits they can bring. And maybe even touch on, there was a question also in the channel around kind of startup businesses as well, how you see RCS having a role there.
Yeah, okay. I'll try to wrap that in one answer and then we can go deeper. So I think, let me start first, for startups and others, how this can improve business strategies. I think, this channel works across the customer journeys. So essentially, it is good for raising awareness and doing discovery, because you could kind of interact in 2 ways, ask questions, get like multimedia video and things like that. It's good for customer acquisition, both as a pull channel, so you can get click to chat and start building those customer journey, or even push for marketing if you hit the right offer to the customers, and they don't need to go out of the channel to complete some part of the journey, let's say like onboarding. It's good for engagement. We just had a case in LATAM around Olympic Games using also Gen AI. During matches, they would be sending engagement messages. It was a brand. They could answer some questions on the statistics and things like that. And then that would lead to some flow. And then it's good for customer support, whether it's coming from call deflection or just as a conversational channel. So with all of these, you can move all the KPIs in a meaningful way, whether that's conversions, whether that's sort of cross sells, upsells, or whether it's reduction of support costs because chatting agents are cheaper than calling agents. But not only that, also net promoter score, even agent satisfaction, essentially. So that's kind of pertaining to the business strategies. Of course, I'll come to pricing. The question is, is the RCS the channel, or as it was asked here, what about WhatsApp and RCS coexisting? I think what we've seen, absolutely yes, they can coexist. In some instances, one channel has higher performance versus the other. Often it's RCS, and I think in some cases, of course, also WhatsApp. But I think they can absolutely coexist, and because different people have different preferences. So some people don't like actually to mix private channel or personal channel with the business channel. So let's take like you're kind of chatting using WhatsApp to chat with your friends. In those cases, actually, it could be good to compartmentalize, to say RCS is my channel where I talk with businesses, and then actually WhatsApp is like a personal channel. Other people won't mind; they will want to have all in one place. So it really depends on a consumer or a customer, like how they like to communicate. I think the focus is on rich messaging, and it also depends on the business and the ROI. You know. How they want to use it, because sometimes it's quite nice that you get something in a native channel with deeper integration with your phone ecosystem and things like that. So the jury is still out, but we see that these channels effectively coexist, and that people really kind of pay attention on the message, and especially as Claudine and Catherine said, like if it's branded, if it's verified, if it's telco grade, it's just like it builds confidence. So that's one thing. So people just need to measure sort of ROI, what's the better return, and compare that to costs, and businesses will decide what to use. I do want to say that there are certain verticals in certain countries that will actually have to decide more on RCS, because RCS is a telco grade channel. So we just got, I don't want to mention the country and regulation because it's hot, but from one country relatively big, we got sort of a letter from the regulator that they won't allow, let's say, banking cases in WhatsApp. And in that case, naturally, banking or things like healthcare might naturally default to RCS because it's a telco channel, verified, more local, etc., etc. So just one more thing. Then there is also a question here, which I will pick immediately, but why organization will burden itself to have multiple channels? To be honest, I think that's kind of the problem, because you will work with a lot of vendors that offer you different things, and then you really kind of have that complexity of burdening organization. But if you work with, let's say, omni-channel platform like Infobip that has all channels natively integrated and that work directly with carriers, you won't need to worry about that complexity. We'll just feed you the data. Hey, this customer prefers this channel, and we'll take care of that complexity. All you need to focus is on the message, and we'll make sure it's delivered whatever the channel. That's why we also build our messages API, where you sort of just need to send us, let's say I want to send a text, a button, and an image, and we'll make sure it's delivered and shows appropriately into a channel. And you just dynamically, or whatever marketing system can decide depending on the customer preferences. Now, the final thing, I spoke a lot and I'll stop, but just that brings me to pricing, right? So, and that also boils on the topic of the ROI. We don't have universal pricing for RCS. It depends on the carriers and so forth. But where we are see that this is panning out, there are three types of messages. There is kind of a simple RCS, which is more an upgrade of SMS. There is kind of more complex RCS, still sort of one way, that has button, has multimedial content, like a lot of rich features. That's looks like equivalent of our MMS. And then there is something that's called P2A, where you can have two-way conversations. This is sort of a continuum as a business, and the pricing kind of increases across these three categories. So the most simpler is cheapest. It's closer to the price of SMS, what we see across the market. And the most complex is cheaper than MMS, so it's in between SMS and MMS. So somehow that's the pricing. The main point with RCS, which is very interesting, you won't be charged for P2A message for the people that didn't engage. So it's not like a template and then, if you want to send P2A message, you will send to 100% of population. You will charge for that 100%. You'll be only charged for P2A message for those that sort of reply to you, and it'll be conversational pricing. So when it comes to pricing, I think it's a big topic. The carriers will need to work, to optimize the pricing to show the ROI versus our alternative channels. But I think there will be a big ROI, and we see it already. And as I said, the pricing will be fair. That's at least what we can tell now. There's no standard pricing across the country, so we won't be able to share like a one thing. But I mean, in principle, it's quite interesting. And I think we would help with ROI calculators and stuff to show, what's the expected cost versus performance of these channels. And I think eventually all the organization will have sort of omni-channel messaging mix, having own channels like in-app chat, having things like WhatsApp, having RCS, and then they will tailor to the preference of the customer.
Yeah, no, you make a lot of really good points there, Dave, and it's exactly right in terms of the kind of the pricing models. Will be interesting, or there'll be the need for kind of a slight, a shift in mindset, and that's in the ecosystem more widely, away from pure kind of transactional messaging. That's absolutely right for kind of hygiene messaging, notification, etc., OTPs. But when use cases move into kind of response-based measurements, activation-based measurements, not necessarily suggesting there'll be a move to performance-based pricing, but what the conversation does shift around ROI and return on spend, rather than just how much does this message cost. It's also worth pointing out, kind of just in terms of the WhatsApp RCS question as well. We actually do have a client that does use both channels right now in Mexico, because they find that the different types of messaging has different performance across each of those channels. So we support them, as even touched on. We support them with our stack of products to ensure that they are delivering the message to the right user over the right channel to optimize their response rate and the performance of their messaging. There is still some time for some questions if you want to pop those into chat, but we are kind of at the latter end of the session. So maybe just a quick question to you all while waiting for some other questions to come in if they do. So maybe I'll start with you, Catherine. In terms of an RCS feature that you would want to see in the future. So what do you think would be a killer capability that will benefit brands?
Well, I think this one's kind of half in already. I think it would be really, really great to see GPay within the channel, because obviously that would mean that everything that and I think this is something that Google are working on. It might not just be configured correctly in the UK yet, but it would be just amazing, because it means that everything that a customer wanted to do in a transaction with a brand, from engaging with content, having a carousel of potential items for purchase, it lends itself to any vertical, and then just being able to click pay at the end would be absolutely amazing. And I do think that we've seen a lot, as Ivan actually spoke about. There's, not to just mention one, but there is some brands that just want to do that sort of walk RCS experience, get that logo, get the blue tick and the read receipts. But then you see others that are really looking at the medium to long term in terms of their customer comms, and then where they want to interact AI within their messaging experience. So that what Infobip can provide in generative AI, I think is really, really, it's going to be a real game changer in terms of cost reduction for brands and customer convenience. So for me, I think those two features will continue to make RCS the proposition that it's becoming and will be in 2025 and onwards.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You made that point earlier around RCS as a replacement to apps, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. The one, maybe the main gap there is around payments. Absolutely that. So you're having that native payment solution, GPay and Apple Pay, hopefully in the future, to avoid driving to web, closing that experience in messaging, keeping the user in the messaging app. Again, it's just making them users more familiar with using the app, more familiar with talking to their brand via the app as well. So yeah, that's a really, really interesting one, really strong one. Claudine, maybe your killer capability.
Yeah, I think you're probably going to have similar answers to Catherine. So for me, definitely the payments, P2A initiation, that's due to come soon. I think that will be Really important for the channel, particularly obviously for conversations. And any AI-driven capability that allows for that sort of asynchronous chat experience. You can start a support query on the web, you need to leave, you can pick that up in your RCS agent. Yep, those are sort of my top 3 if I'm going to be put on the spot.
Yeah, no, P2A is a really kind of interesting, just because of the number of use cases it opens up, right? And moves you away from needing to have an opt-in, because you're asking the user to contact you from where you can then start that conversation, that experience.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's less about the opt-in, because obviously you've got the opt-in for SMS, the opt-in is there for RCS, but it's just about being able to initiate that communication when the consumer wants to, and how the consumer wants to as well. I think David, it was you that talked about, and Infobip have consistently talked about offering rich messaging solutions rather than necessarily focusing on a particular channel. And whilst this is obviously about RCS, RBM, and clearly I work for a carrier, so that's where my interests lie. I do think it is important to be able to offer consumer choice and the easiest, slickest way for them to have a really engaging and delightful experience. Yeah,
and that point around consumer choice is interesting, because you also referenced the asynchronous capabilities of communication via RCS and messaging, which you do live chat experience, for example, getting some customer support, trying to work out how to fix your TV or the like. So yeah, again, that's customer choice. I can ask the question now. I'll come back to try and get the answer when I have the opportunity to.
Yeah.
And Ivan, you as well. I'm not sure if you missed the question, but in terms of
I saw that I was here. So actually, I will kind of just affirm payments at the beginning will be big, of course, and then availability of Gen AI, which we already exposed. We did the first Vertex integration, and we did also kind of through Azure OpenAI integration. So I think that'll work. So those are the two that we overlap. I just to add a little bit, given this, just to add one more, and I think we're starting to do that, is, let's say, if we could serve like a middleware to connect RCS to most common software platform, vertical platform, and let's say content marketing like video clouds and stuff platforms, and be able to kind of have that easily exposable in RCS for businesses like anything else. So if you want to create one-on-one hyper-personalized video for that consumer, you can do it so quickly. Or if you, I don't know, if you want to kind of connect with like Shopify to expose catalog on e-commerce, you can do that very easily. So I think that's a third. I don't know if it's a feature of a channel necessarily, or this is a work for us. We are already starting to do that, but I think that will be very important in order to get even further agility in building more complex customer journeys within the channel, which I think it holds the promise.
No, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much that's possible right now. There's so much that's going to be possible in the very near future. There's so much potential in the medium longer term as well, as kind of picking up all of these points. I think it's a really exciting time. And say, I think I make a point again of not talking about the short term, but really looking at the medium longer term. And for me, I think maybe even you used this phrase before, Claudine. It's inevitable. So it's it's making sure we're riding that wave as we get there, and absolutely.
Yeah. The one thing that's also part of the ecosystem is the entry points. The more we have click to chat from, we're now testing TikTok in LATAM, coming out from Google search, being able to come from different entry points. It's going to be also one kind of killer feature. I don't know if it's a channel or an ecosystem, but it'll be very important because that'll drive more conversations into the channel.
For sure. I did see a couple of quick questions that would be worth ticking off quite quickly. I'll try and hit them like a machine gun. What can regulators do to make RCS embedded in the ecosystem? Well, kind of touched on that point earlier in terms of the kind of the factors that are required to enable to get carriers on board and enable RCS in a given carrier ecosystem. I think the role of regulators is, as it is with other carrier-based messaging channels, right, to make sure it's fully compliant and to hold carriers and the likes of ourselves and our brands to the standards that are required of the channel. So, and I think RCS is extremely well positioned to be able to do that. A couple of other questions: is RCS generally available now via Infobip? And any speculation on the future of Apple Messaging for Business. I'll answer the second one first in terms of Apple Messaging for Business. Absolutely, we don't see that going away, but I think the use cases are quite different in many ways than RCS. But to answer that one and the first one, I'm going to shamelessly send you in the direction of that QR code top left. Leave your contact details, leave the question, and we'll be able to reach out with you for more details about that, Clane and Stephen. So we're done. I think we're really close on time. So as I say, I think last chance to just nudge you in the direction of that QR code top left.
Just on AMB, which is one of my passions. I really love how much Apple puts care into this channel, not allow it to be spammy, making sure the experience is. It's not easy to work, but it's really admirable what they're doing. And I don't think that channel is going away. Actually, it's getting an upgrade. They will allow outbound messaging for the businesses on predefined templates. So that's interesting. And of course, you still have a blue bubble if it matters for anyone on iPhone when you use Apple Messages for Business. So I think, again, if you think of different vendors, different APIs, different commands, then it gets complex. If you think of somebody who can bring that in one native platform and just kind of smoothly move customers from one channel to another, then it's a little bit, let's call it, easier. So in that sense, I think that'll decide on usability, but generally channel has very deep integration with iPhone, and probably deeper than RCS will ever have, although RCS will get more. So I think it'll stay there, and for a particular set of use cases.
Brilliant, Ivan. So drawing to a close, I want to make a couple of call outs. Firstly, I say, obviously the QR code, there's a little message that comes up every time someone scans the QR code. I think I earn maybe £5 or £10 for each time it gets scanned. I think we agreed that, Ivan, didn't we? It's worth a try. But no, just to
there was a break in internet. I didn't really.
No, please, someone's scanning it. There's a referral link. I'll pay referral fees. So firstly, just to reference, ourselves and Omdia worked on an RCS white paper very recently. So people in the direction of that, and also just to highlight the report out recently from Juniper that placed Infobip, top right, with you could drive a bus between us and our competitors in terms of the leadership on RCS. So please do have a check on our website where you can find out more details about that. But also importantly, we'll soon be releasing details about our third in the series webinar around RCS, which will be coming out in the very, very near future. So please do, if you're not already, follow Infobip on LinkedIn. And so with that, thank you very, very much, Claudine, Ivan, and Catherine. Really appreciate your inputs today and really appreciate your time in preparation and obviously on this session itself. And absolutely thank you to everyone who's been listening, asking questions, and has paid attention and stayed awake through the entire session. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's great
Bye
to
now.
be with this.
Cheers, everyone.